That we're also continuing to keep track of power outages throughout the area, keeping you up to speed with Entergy and the grid that showed some 200,000 people without power, but they've made lots of progress overnight. Officials from Entergy just held a conference call with reporters. Rachel Handley was on that call, joins us now from the WWL Louisiana Help Desk to fill us in there. So what's Entergy saying?
Well, we haven't gotten a lot of specifics on restoration times yet.
Okay.
The main message that they had on this call that I just got off of this maybe a minute ago, so I'm still kind of gathering my notes here. But their main point was that in the New Orleans area, they are starting the restoration process now. They say they've moved their resources from staging areas to actually going out and doing things, and so they wanted people to know that so that they know to be careful on roads as these trucks and as these workers and the first responders who may be accompanying them are going out. So that was a big one. They also talked about who was the hardest hit, and they also kind of speculated on some of the reasons that the power outages were so bad during this storm for the hardest hit ones. And we already knew this. I mean, Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes as of right now, more than 20,000 without power in Terrebonne and more than 30,000 in Lafourche. I asked them specifically about Terrebonne and Lafourche to see if they had any even just vague timelines for a restoration update. Is this going to be like Ida, where some places are out of power for almost a month, or is it going to be more like, you know, a standard thunderstorm power outage? And they said, and they really stressed that this is not a specific timeline for this storm. This is just generally what they say in these scenarios. They say a Category 1 hurricane, they usually tell people up to a week, and they'll say 7+ days for Category 2. So that's the very rough timeline they say we could be looking at this point. But they said in those areas there are complications to trying to assess these things. It's not always a matter of just going up to, you know, a transmission line and being able to see exactly what's going on. There are marshy areas, there are places where equipment has a hard time getting to, so they're just starting all of those assessments now that the storm has passed. So again, we got some updates on this call, but we are still waiting to hear more specifics. They also talked about vegetation a lot. They said that that seems to be a main driver of these outages rather than transmission failures.
So down trees and whatnot.
Yeah. They said that the recent drought probably made this problem worse, and they stress that even, you know, a small twig or like 2 small sticks can in a situation like this cause problems. And so they said that vegetation so far in their preliminary assessments seems to be a main driver of all of these outages. So that's another thing that's complicating.
That makes sense.
Yeah, complicating the process of getting all this back together. Couple more things for people to know. They said that if you see any kind of down power line or any kind of electrical equipment that you think could be a hazard, to report it to 1-800-ENERGY. And we have been showing you, again, pictures from the area all morning, and in a few of those we have seen some pieces of electrical equipment on the ground. So we know that some of you out there are seeing it. So 1-800-ENERGY is where you're supposed to report that. They also said, and I thought this was interesting. It's not something we normally talk about in the wake of this, but they said scams and attempted scams go up a lot after outages. They say most commonly people will call people or show up to their door and say, hey, I can restore your power for X amount of money, and they pay them the money and then they don't do anything, of course. And they really wanted to stress that they are never going to ask you for money for a weather-related outage, to fix a weather-related outage. So they said also, if you suspect that somebody out there is trying to scam you with something power outage related, you can report that to 1-800-ENERGY too. So that's kind of the catch-all line for problems like this.
Sure, yeah, and you know, when we did hear from Councilwoman at Large Jennifer Van Franken and JP, who has a number of power outages. She said she also spoke with Entergy just before that call, and they did emphasize kind of what you're saying, that they're also prioritizing not just the locations, but also some of the more important buildings and infrastructures within those locations. So that might also add to time, because say for like restoring a hospital, that's going to take a bit more time than it would a single home or a street of homes. So that's sort of the process I know that they're following, but it's going to,
and Entergy had even mentioned hospitals specifically as being one of their priorities, and pumping stations, just any kind of critical infrastructure that people rely on. They also said that they are prioritizing any kind of repairs that will bring power back to as many people as possible. So that's something to know if you live on, you know, a small rural street where maybe you're one of only a few households on your, you know, nearby electrical system. That might mean that your power is restored slower as opposed to somebody on a, you know, busy city block.
And Rachel, again, the number stands right now at 272,064 customers affected within the state of Louisiana, according to Entergy. I want to ask you this, and you may not have the answer just yet, because as you mentioned, you just got back from that call that started a little after 9, and so you're giving us just the information that you got as you get it. You're still gathering a lot of the details there, but Entergy says that it seems as though most of the culprit here would be vegetation, trees falling, whatnot. But one of the concerns we see in communities such as, for instance, Terrebonne Parish, the grid there in Houma, the infrastructure there in Houma is still being repaired, damage from Hurricane Ida, and so Entergy is providing some of the power from the New Orleans area. And so while they say vegetation is the primary culprit here, have they said anything about the status of, for instance, the system in Terrebonne Parish, which already had damage and they were working to resolve there? Did they talk about any of that?
No, that wasn't really addressed. And with the format of this call, we were, I was able to ask 2 questions, and then they ended the question period. But they did say, one of my questions was, how often are you going to provide these updates? And they said that they will keep doing these types of updates in some form as they you know, continue the process of restoration. So I think that's a great question, and I do think that it's something we should press them on as this moves forward.
So what she's saying is write it down and make a little star next to it.
Right. We thank you for that, and for the record, Rachel is running back and forth to and from the newsroom.
She hasn't been in that seat long. She goes back and forth, and so we do appreciate that. We know you jumped off that call, and we're just trying to reverb everything you were thinking of, but you know, we took notes, and I got a whole page here, so really good information. Thank you so much,
Rachel. And I asked that question, you know, not to offer any criticism. That's not our responsibility to do so, as we say thank you to Rachel, but to get to more of a